Marcus Redfeather had always been different from the other men in his tribe. At 32, he stood taller than most, with traditional Cheyenne features softened by a gentleness that made children gravitate toward him and elders seek his counsel. His wife had died in childbirth 3 winters ago, taking their unborn son with her, and since then, Marcus had thrown himself into his role as a warrior and protector of his people. The reservation where they lived in Montana was harsh, with limited resources and constant struggles against poverty and discrimination from the surrounding white communities. It was during one of his routine patrols along the outer boundaries of their land that Marcus discovered something that would change his life forever. The late autumn air was crisp, and the first snow had begun to dust the prairie grass when he noticed smoke rising from an abandoned homestead about 2 miles from the reservation border. The old wooden house had been empty for years, left behind by settlers who couldn't make a living from the unforgiving soil. As Marcus approached cautiously, his hand resting on the knife at his belt, he heard something that made his blood run cold, the weak, desperate crying of an infant. He quickened his pace, his heart pounding as he realized someone had left a baby in this desolate place. The front door hung crooked on its hinges, and inside the house was a wreck of broken furniture and shattered glass. But there, in the corner of what had once been a bedroom, sat an old cedar chest, and from within came the unmistakable sound of a baby's cries. Marcus lifted the heavy lid with trembling hands, and what he saw took his breath away. Nestled in a pile of worn blankets was a tiny infant, no more than a few days old, with skin so pale it was almost translucent and hair as white as fresh snow. The baby's eyes, when they fluttered open, were a striking pale blue, almost colorless. Marcus had never seen an albino child before, but he knew immediately what he was looking at. Someone had abandoned this vulnerable little one, probably because of their unusual appearance. Without hesitation, Marcus scooped the baby into his arms, feeling how cold and weak the tiny body was. The infant was severely dehydrated and malnourished, barely clinging to life. Marcus wrapped the child in his own jacket and ran back to his horse, riding hard toward the reservation's small medical clinic. Dr. Patricia Whitehorse, the tribe's only physician, worked frantically to stabilize the baby, while Marcus paced the waiting area, his mind racing with questions about who could have done such a thing. "It's a miracle this child is alive," Dr. Whitehorse told him hours later. "A few more hours and we would have been too late. It's a little girl, probably born to someone who panicked when they saw her condition. Albinism is rare, and unfortunately, some people still believe old superstitions about children who look different." Marcus felt a surge of protective anger. How could anyone abandon an innocent child simply because of how she looked? As he gazed down at the sleeping infant in the clinic's makeshift nursery, something stirred in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced since losing his own family. This little girl needed him, and perhaps he realized he needed her too. The tribal council met the next day to discuss what should be done with the foundling. Several members argued that they should contact social services and let the state handle the situation. Their resources were already stretched thin, and taking in a child with special needs would be an additional burden. Elder Thomas Spotted Eagle, the council's most influential member, was particularly vocal in his opposition. "We have our own children to worry about," he said, his weathered face stern. "This child isn't Cheyenne. She's white, and she'll need medical care we can't provide. It's not our responsibility." But Marcus stood up from his seat in the back of the room, his voice steady and determined. "With respect, Elder Spotted Eagle, this child was found on land that borders our territory. She was abandoned and left to die. If we turn our backs on her now, what does that say about who we are as a people? Our ancestors taught us that all children are sacred, regardless of where they come from or what they look like." The debate continued for hours, with the community divided. Some supported Marcus's position, moved by his passionate argument and the tragic circumstances of the baby's abandonment. Others worried about the practical challenges and potential conflicts with state authorities. Finally, Elder Spotted Eagle called for a recess, and the council members dispersed to consider their decision. That evening, Marcus visited Dr. Whitehorse again. The baby had been stable throughout the day, but she would need ongoing medical attention and eventually specialized care for her albinism, including protection from sun exposure and regular eye examinations. "I want to adopt her," Marcus told the doctor quietly. "I know it won't be easy, but I can't let her go into the system. She belongs here with people who will love her." Dr. Whitehorse studied his face carefully. "Marcus, are you sure about this? Raising any child alone is challenging, but caring for a child with albinism will require extra vigilance and resources. You'll face questions from both your own community and the outside world about your decision to adopt a white child." Marcus nodded firmly. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life. When I found her in that chest, barely alive and completely helpless, something changed in me. I felt like my wife was speaking to me, telling me that this child was meant to be mine. I know it sounds crazy, but I believe everything happens for a reason." The next morning, Marcus arrived at the council meeting early, carrying a folder full of research he had done overnight about albinism, adoption procedures, and legal requirements. He had contacted a lawyer in Billings who specialized in Native American family law, and he had prepared a comprehensive plan for the child's care and education. When Elder Spotted Eagle called the meeting to order, Marcus requested permission to speak first. "I know many of you have concerns about my proposal to adopt this child," he began, his voice carrying across the small meeting room. but I want you to know that I haven't made this decision lightly. I've spent the night researching everything I can about caring for a child with albinism, and I've already begun the legal process of filing for adoption. I have the financial resources to provide for her medical needs, and I'm prepared to make whatever sacrifices necessary to give her a good life. He pulled out photographs of the abandoned homestead where he had found the baby, showing the broken-down condition of the house and the isolation of the location. "Someone left this child to die," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "They threw her away like garbage because she looked different. If we don't step up and show her that she has value, that she deserves love and protection, then we're no better than whoever abandoned her." Marcus then shared his research about albinism, explaining that while children with the condition faced certain challenges, they could live full, productive lives with proper care and support. He had already contacted specialists in Billings and Denver who could provide the necessary medical treatment, and he had spoken with teachers who had experience working with visually impaired students. The room was silent as Marcus finished his presentation. Several council members exchanged glances, and he could see that his words had made an impact. Elder Thomas Spotted Eagle leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he spoke. "Marcus Redfeather, your passion for this child is evident, and your preparation is impressive. But adopting across racial lines is complicated, especially for a Native American man seeking to adopt a white child. The state may fight you on this, and even if you succeed, you'll face judgment from both communities. Are you prepared for that kind of scrutiny?" Marcus met the elder's gaze steadily. "I'm prepared for whatever comes. This little girl needs a father, and I need her just as much. I believe that love transcends race and that family is about more than blood. My ancestors survived centuries of persecution and forced separation from their children. I won't let fear of bureaucracy or prejudice prevent me from doing what's right." The council voted that afternoon, and by a narrow margin, they agreed to support Marcus's adoption petition. Dr. Whitehorse would coordinate with social services to ensure that all legal requirements were met, and the tribe would provide whatever assistance they could during the transition period. As Marcus left the meeting, several community members approached him with offers of help: baby clothes, a crib, toys, and emotional support. That night, Marcus sat in the clinic's nursery, holding the tiny girl who would soon become his daughter. She had been growing stronger each day, and her pale blue eyes seemed to focus on his face with increasing awareness. "I'm going to call you Emma," he whispered, choosing a name that meant universal or whole. "Emma Redfeather. You're going to grow up knowing that you're loved, that you're wanted, and that you belong here with us." As the first snow of winter began to fall outside the clinic windows, Marcus felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced since losing his wife. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with legal challenges, medical appointments, and the constant need to prove himself as a father. But he was ready for the fight because this abandoned child had given him something precious, a second chance at family, and a renewed sense of purpose that would guide him through whatever obstacles lay ahead. The news of Marcus's decision spread quickly through the reservation and beyond. Some people praised his compassion and courage, while others questioned his judgment and motives. Local newspapers picked up the story, and soon Marcus found himself fielding calls from reporters, social workers, and both supporters and critics from across the region. But through it all, his focus remained on Emma, who continued to grow stronger under his watchful care and the expert attention of Dr. Whitehorse. Social services arrived within the week to begin their investigation. The caseworker, a stern woman named Janet Morrison, made no attempt to hide her skepticism about the unusual adoption request. She questioned Marcus extensively about his motives, his finances, his support system, and his understanding of the challenges involved in raising a child with albinism. She also expressed concern about the appropriateness of a Native American man adopting a white child, citing potential cultural identity issues. Marcus answered every question with patience and thorough preparation. He had documentation of his stable income from his job with the tribal police force, letters of recommendation from community leaders and employers, and detailed medical information about Emma's condition and care requirements. He had also prepared a comprehensive parenting plan that addressed everything from daily routines to long-term educational goals. "Mr. Redfeather," Janet Morrison said during one particularly tense interview, "I have to ask, are you certain this isn't some kind of political statement? Adopting a white child as a Native American man in today's climate could be seen as provocative." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "Ms. Morrison, this has nothing to do with politics or making statements. This is about a helpless child who was abandoned and left to die. When I found Emma in that chest, barely clinging to life, I didn't see a white baby or a Native baby. I saw a human being who needed saving. My decision to adopt her is based purely on love and the belief that every child deserves a family." Despite the challenges and scrutiny, Marcus never wavered in his commitment. He spent every free moment at the clinic with Emma, learning how to care for her special needs and bonding with the infant who seemed to recognize his voice and presence. Dr. Whitehorse taught him about protecting Emma's sensitive skin from sunlight, the importance of regular eye examinations, and the various health issues that could arise as she grew older. As winter deepened and the legal process continued, Marcus began preparing his home for Emma's arrival. Community members rallied around him, donating furniture, clothes, and money to help with medical expenses. His neighbor, an elderly woman named Grace Littlewolf, offered to help with childcare, and several younger tribal members volunteered to assist with transportation to medical appointments in Billings. The transformation in Marcus was evident to everyone who knew him. The quiet grief that had shadowed him since his wife's death began to lift, replaced by a renewed energy and sense of purpose. He threw himself into learning everything he could about child development, albinism, and parenting, reading books, attending online seminars, and consulting with specialists across the country. 3 months after finding Emma in the abandoned chest, Marcus received the call he had been waiting for. Janet Morrison informed him that his adoption petition had been approved, and he could officially take Emma home. The news spread quickly through the reservation, and that evening, the community gathered at the tribal center for an impromptu celebration. Elder Thomas Spotted Eagle, despite his initial reservations, offered a blessing for Marcus and Emma. "The Great Spirit works in mysterious ways," he said, his weathered hands resting on the baby's pale head. "This child was brought to us for a reason, and Marcus Redfeather has shown us what it means to open our hearts to those who need us most." As Marcus carried Emma into his modest home for the first time, he felt overwhelmed with gratitude and determination. The little girl who had been thrown away like unwanted baggage had become the center of his world, and he was ready to dedicate his life to proving that love, not blood or skin color, was what truly made a family. Looking down at Emma's peaceful face as she slept in his arms, Marcus whispered a promise that would guide him through all the challenges and joys to come. "You are my daughter, Emma Redfeather, and I will spend every day of my life making sure you know how precious and loved you are." The journey had just begun, but Marcus knew that finding Emma in that old chest had been the moment his real life started. Together, they would face whatever obstacles came their way, bound not by genetics or tradition, but by an unbreakable bond forged in love and sealed by choice. 6 months had passed since Marcus officially adopted Emma, and life had settled into a routine that felt natural despite the unique challenges they faced daily. Emma was thriving under his care, growing into a healthy, alert baby whose pale blue eyes seemed to take in everything around her with intense curiosity. Her white hair had grown into soft curls that caught the light like spun silver, and her skin, while requiring constant protection from the sun, had lost the sickly pallor she'd had when Marcus first found her. The reservation community had largely embraced Emma, though not without some ongoing tension. Most tribal members had come to accept her as one of their own, especially after seeing how devoted Marcus was to her care, and how the child seemed to flourish in the loving environment he provided. Children, in particular, were fascinated by Emma's unusual appearance, often asking innocent questions about why she looked different. Marcus used these moments as teaching opportunities, explaining about genetic diversity and the importance of accepting people regardless of their physical characteristics. However, challenges from the outside world continued to mount. The story of the Native American man who adopted an abandoned white baby had gained national attention, bringing both supporters and critics out of the woodwork. Marcus received letters from across the country, some praising his compassion and others questioning his motives or expressing racist views about interracial adoption. He learned to ignore most of the negativity, focusing instead on the positive responses from families dealing with similar situations and medical professionals who supported his decision. Dr. Patricia Whitehorse had become not just Emma's physician, but also a close family friend. She monitored Emma's development carefully, coordinating with specialists in larger cities to ensure the child received the best possible care for her albinism. The appointments were expensive and required long trips to Billings or Denver, but Marcus had managed to secure partial coverage through tribal health services and had started a small fundraising effort within the community. "She's exceeding all our expectations," Dr. Whitehorse told Marcus during one of their regular checkups. "Her vision is developing normally within the parameters we'd expect for a child with albinism, and her overall health is excellent. You're doing an amazing job, Marcus." The compliment meant everything to Marcus, who often felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising a child with special needs. Every decision seemed fraught with additional considerations, from choosing the right sunscreen and protective clothing to researching schools that could accommodate Emma's visual requirements as she grew older. He had connected with other parents of children with albinism through online support groups, finding comfort and practical advice from people who understood the unique challenges they faced. One particular challenge arose when Emma was 9 months old. A social worker from the State Department, different from Janet Morrison, who had handled the adoption, arrived unannounced for what she called a routine follow-up visit. Linda Patterson was younger than Morrison, but carried herself with an aggressive officiousness that immediately put Marcus on edge. "Mr. Redfeather," she said, declining his offer of coffee and pulling out a thick file, "I'm here because we've received several complaints about this adoption. Some people are concerned about whether this arrangement is truly in the child's best interests." Marcus felt his stomach drop. What kind of complaints? Who would? He stopped himself, realizing that getting defensive wouldn't help the situation. "I'm sorry, Ms. Patterson. Could you be more specific about the concerns that have been raised?" Patterson flipped through her paperwork with deliberate slowness. "There are questions about cultural identity issues, concerns about the child's access to appropriate medical care given the remote location, and frankly, some people have suggested that your motivations for this adoption might not be entirely pure." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest but forced himself to remain calm. "Ms. Patterson, I'd like to know who made these complaints and what specific evidence they have to support their concerns. Emma is thriving in every measurable way. Her medical care exceeds what most children receive. She's developmentally on track, and she's surrounded by a loving community that has embraced her completely. I'm not at liberty to reveal the sources of the complaints," Patterson replied curtly. "But I am required to conduct a thorough investigation. I'll need to interview several community members, review all medical records, and spend time observing your interactions with the child." The investigation lasted 3 weeks and felt like an eternity to Marcus. Patterson interviewed neighbors, tribal council members, Dr. Whitehorse, and even some of the children who played with Emma during community gatherings. She scrutinized every aspect of Marcus's home, his finances, his parenting methods, and his support system. Throughout it all, Marcus maintained his composure, though privately he worried constantly about the possibility of losing Emma. Elder Thomas Spotted Eagle proved to be an unexpected ally during this difficult time. Despite his initial reservations about the adoption, he had grown fond of Emma and had observed how positively she had affected the entire community. When Patterson interviewed him, he spoke eloquently about the Cheyenne values of protecting children and the importance of judging people by their actions rather than their appearance. "That child has brought joy back to Marcus Redfeather," the elder told Patterson firmly. "She has also reminded all of us what it means to love unconditionally. If you take her away from the only father she has ever known, you will be committing a grave injustice." Dr. Whitehorse was equally supportive, providing detailed documentation of Emma's excellent health and development. She also presented Patterson with letters from specialists in Denver and Billings who praised Marcus's dedication to Emma's medical care and his thorough understanding of her needs. The turning point came during Patterson's final visit. She had been observing Marcus and Emma during their morning routine when the baby began crying inconsolably. Marcus tried everything: feeding, changing, rocking, but nothing seemed to comfort her. Just as Patterson was taking notes about his inability to calm the child, Emma suddenly reached up and grasped Marcus's finger, her crying stopping instantly as she gazed into his eyes with obvious recognition and trust. "She knows you," Patterson said quietly, her pen hovering over her notepad. "She really knows you." Marcus nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "She's my daughter in every way that matters. I would die for this child, Ms. Patterson. She's not just some project or statement. She's my heart walking around outside my body." Patterson closed her notepad and gathered her papers. "Mr. Redfeather, I want you to know that in 15 years of child welfare work, I've rarely seen a bond as strong as what I've witnessed between you and Emma. The complaints against you appear to be motivated by prejudice rather than genuine concern for the child's welfare. My report will reflect that Emma is thriving in your care and that this adoption should continue without interference. The relief Marcus felt was overwhelming, but it was tempered by anger at having been put through such an ordeal. He later learned through community contacts that the complaints had come from a group of white supremacists in a neighboring town who objected to what they saw as a reverse kidnapping of a white child by a Native American. The irony that these same people would probably have supported Emma's abandonment was not lost on anyone involved in the case. As Emma's first birthday approached, Marcus reflected on the incredible journey they had been on together. The tiny, near-death infant he had found in that old chest had grown into a vibrant, curious toddler who was beginning to walk and babble in both English and Cheyenne words she picked up from community members. Her albinism remained a constant consideration in their daily lives, but Marcus had adapted completely to the routines of sunscreen application, protective clothing, and regular medical appointments. The birthday celebration became a community-wide event, with dozens of tribal members gathering to honor both Emma's first year of life and Marcus's first year as her father. Traditional foods were prepared alongside Emma's favorite baby snacks. An elder spotted eagle performed a blessing ceremony that formally welcomed Emma into the tribe as an honorary member. Today we celebrate not just this child's birth, the elder said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd, but also the birth of a new understanding in our community. We have learned that family is not defined by the color of our skin or the blood in our veins, but by the love in our hearts and the commitment we make to care for one another. Marcus stood holding Emma, who was fascinated by all the attention and activity around her. She had grown into a beautiful child whose unusual appearance was now simply part of who she was to everyone who knew her. Her pale skin required constant vigilance, but her bright personality and infectious curiosity had won over even the most skeptical community members. That evening, after the celebration had ended and Emma was sleeping peacefully in her crib, Marcus sat on his porch looking up at the stars. He thought about the day he had found her, how desperate and hopeless the situation had seemed, and how far they had both come since then. Emma had given him a purpose and joy he never expected to feel again after losing his wife, and he had given her something even more precious, a chance at life and the unconditional love every child deserved. A year ago, Marcus had been a grieving widower going through the motions of living. Now he was a father with plans and dreams for the future. He wanted to save money for Emma's college education, to travel with her to see specialists and educational opportunities, to teach her about both her adopted Cheyenne heritage and help her understand her biological background as she grew older. The challenges were far from over. Emma would face questions about her identity, difficulties with her vision, and ongoing medical needs throughout her childhood. There would always be people who questioned the adoption or made inappropriate comments about their interracial father-daughter relationship. But Marcus was ready for all of it, because he had learned something important during their first year together. Love was stronger than prejudice. Commitment was more powerful than biology. And sometimes the most beautiful families were the ones that chose each other against all odds. As he prepared for bed, Marcus checked on Emma one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, her white curls spread across her pillow like moonbeams, her pale skin glowing softly in the dim light from the hallway. This was the child who had been thrown away, discarded like trash because someone couldn't see past her physical differences. Now she was the center of a loving community, the daughter of a man who would move mountains to protect her, and living proof that miracles could emerge from the darkest circumstances. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and adventures, but tonight, Marcus felt nothing but gratitude for the unexpected gift that had changed both their lives forever. Emma's third birthday marked a significant milestone in both her development and Marcus's journey as her father. The little girl who had once been so fragile that Dr. Whitehorse wasn't sure she would survive had grown into a spirited, intelligent toddler whose curiosity about the world seemed boundless, despite the visual limitations imposed by her albinism. She could walk confidently around familiar spaces, had developed a vocabulary of over 100 words in both English and Cheyenne, and had begun showing signs of the artistic talent that would later become one of her defining characteristics. Marcus had learned to navigate the constant balance between protecting Emma and allowing her to explore and grow. Their home had been modified with her needs in mind, soft lighting throughout, furniture arranged in consistent patterns so she could move around safely, and a special play area with high-contrast toys and materials that were easier for her to see clearly. He had also become expert at reading her subtle cues about when the lighting was too bright or when she was experiencing eye strain. The broader community had evolved significantly in their acceptance and understanding of Emma's condition. What had initially been curiosity and sometimes uncomfortable stares had transformed into genuine affection and protective concern. Children who had once asked endless questions about why Emma looked different now simply included her in their games, automatically adjusting activities to accommodate her visual needs without making a big deal about it. However, the outside world remained more challenging. As Emma grew older and more mobile, trips off the reservation became increasingly complicated. Marcus had to carry a bag filled with protective gear, special sunglasses, wide-brimmed hats, long-sleeved clothing, multiple types of sunscreen, and eye drops for when she experienced discomfort. Public spaces were often poorly lit for someone with albinism, and Marcus found himself constantly scanning environments for potential hazards or difficulties Emma might encounter. The medical aspects of caring for Emma had become routine, but remained expensive and time-consuming. Regular appointments with ophthalmologists in Denver every 6 months, dermatology checkups to monitor her skin for any problems, and ongoing assessments of her developmental progress required significant time away from work and considerable financial resources. Marcus had taken on additional duties with the tribal police force to help cover these costs, and the community had organized several fundraising events to support Emma's medical needs. One particularly challenging incident occurred when Emma was 3.5. Marcus had taken her to a grocery store in Billings, and despite his careful preparation with protective clothing and sunglasses, a fluorescent light fixture above one of the aisles was flickering in a way that caused Emma significant discomfort. She began crying and trying to cover her eyes, clearly distressed by the harsh, unstable lighting. As Marcus attempted to comfort Emma and move her away from the problematic area, a store employee approached them aggressively. "Sir, you need to control your child or leave the store," the young man said loudly, drawing attention from other customers. "She's disturbing other shoppers." Marcus felt his temper rise but forced himself to remain calm. "My daughter has a medical condition that makes her sensitive to certain types of lighting. We're trying to move away from this area, but she's in pain right now." The employee looked skeptical and seemed annoyed by the explanation. "Look, I don't know what kind of condition you're talking about, but crying kids need to be taken outside. That's store policy." Several other customers had stopped to watch the confrontation, and Marcus could feel their stares focused on Emma's unusual appearance. He realized that some people probably thought she was sick or contagious, while others might be making assumptions about his parenting abilities based on his race and Emma's ethnicity. "The problem is with your lighting fixture," Marcus said firmly, pointing upward. "It's flickering and causing her pain. If you could either fix it or turn it off temporarily, we could finish our shopping without any problems." The employee glanced up dismissively. "The lights are fine. You need to deal with your kids' behavior problems." At that moment, an older woman who had been observing the situation stepped forward. "Young man," she said to the employee in a voice that brooked no argument, "I've been watching this whole interaction, and this father is handling his daughter beautifully. The child clearly has albinism, which makes her extremely sensitive to bright lights. Instead of being rude and ignorant, you should be helping them find a solution." The woman turned to Marcus with a kind smile. "My granddaughter has the same condition. Would it help if I held Emma while you finished your shopping? Sometimes a different person can be distracting enough to help them calm down." Marcus felt a wave of gratitude toward this stranger who had not only understood the situation but had stepped in to help. "That's very kind of you, but I think we'll just leave and come back another time. Thank you for understanding." As they left the store, the woman followed them to the parking lot. "I'm Margaret Chen," she said, extending her hand. "My daughter lives in Denver with her little girl who has albinism. I know how challenging it can be to deal with people who don't understand the condition." Marcus shook her hand gratefully. "I'm Marcus Redfeather, and this is Emma. It's not often we meet people who really get what we're dealing with." Margaret smiled at Emma, who had calmed down once they were away from the harsh lighting. "She's beautiful. How old is she?" 3.5, Marcus replied, adjusting Emma's hat to better shade her face from the afternoon sun. "We've been dealing with situations like this since I adopted her, but it never gets easier." "Adopted?" Margaret looked surprised but pleased. "What a wonderful thing you've done. It can't have been easy, especially as a single father." Marcus found himself opening up to this understanding stranger about some of the challenges they had faced. The legal battles, the medical complexities, the social prejudices, and the ongoing struggle to help Emma navigate a world that wasn't designed for people with her condition. Margaret listened with genuine interest and offered practical advice based on her family's experiences. "The most important thing," she told him as they prepared to part ways, "is to teach her that her albinism is just one part of who she is, not a limitation that defines her entire life. My granddaughter is 8 now, and she's thriving in school, has lots of friends, and is an amazing artist. Emma can have all of that too with the right support and advocacy." That conversation stayed with Marcus for weeks afterward. He had been so focused on protecting Emma from the physical challenges of her condition that he hadn't spent enough time thinking about how to help her develop emotional resilience and self-confidence. He began researching resources for children with albinism, connecting with other families online, and looking into early intervention programs that could help Emma develop coping strategies as she grew older. The incident at the store also motivated Marcus to become more proactive about education and advocacy within their community and beyond. He began giving presentations at schools and community centers about albinism, working to dispel myths and misconceptions while raising awareness about the needs of people with the condition. Emma often accompanied him to these events, her presence serving as a powerful reminder that children with differences were still just children who deserved acceptance and understanding. Dr. Whitehorse supported these efforts and helped Marcus develop educational materials that were both medically accurate and accessible to general audiences. They created a simple brochure explaining albinism that Marcus could distribute when they encountered situations like the one at the grocery store. And they worked with the tribal education department to develop curriculum materials about genetic diversity and disability awareness. As Emma approached her 4th birthday, her personality had begun to shine through more clearly. She was incredibly observant, noticing details that others missed, and had developed an impressive memory for sounds, textures, and spatial relationships. Her artistic abilities were becoming more evident as well. She could create elaborate drawings using high-contrast markers and showed a natural talent for working with clay and other three-dimensional materials. Marcus had also noticed that Emma seemed to have an unusual ability to connect with animals. Dogs and cats were naturally drawn to her, and she showed remarkable patience and gentleness when interacting with them. This led him to consider whether a service dog might be beneficial for Emma as she grew older, both for mobility assistance and emotional support. The relationship between Marcus and Emma had deepened into something truly special. She had begun calling him Daddy around her 2nd birthday, and the word never failed to fill him with joy and gratitude. Their daily routines had become second nature. The careful application of sunscreen, the selection of appropriate clothing for the day's activities, the constant awareness of lighting conditions and potential hazards. But within those routines was a normal father-daughter relationship filled with bedtime stories, silly games, cooking adventures, and quiet moments of connection. Emma's presence had also changed Marcus's relationship with his own grief and healing. The pain of losing his wife would always be part of him, but caring for Emma had given him a new understanding of love's capacity to expand rather than simply replace what was lost. He often felt that his wife would have adored Emma and would have been proud of the man and father he had become through this unexpected journey. Community support remained strong, though it had evolved from crisis-driven assistance to a more sustainable network of ongoing help and friendship. Grace Littlewolf continued to provide regular childcare, and several younger tribal members had become like extended family to Emma. The tribal council had formally recognized Emma as an honorary member, and she participated in age-appropriate cultural activities and celebrations. Financial challenges persisted, but had become more manageable through a combination of Marcus's steady income, community fundraising efforts, and connections he had made with organizations that supported families dealing with albinism. He had learned to navigate insurance systems, apply for grants, and advocate effectively for Emma's needs within medical and educational systems. As Marcus tucked Emma into bed on the night before her 4th birthday, she looked up at him with her pale blue eyes and asked, "Daddy, why did my first mommy and daddy leave me in that box?" The question he had been dreading had finally come, and Marcus felt his heart race as he considered how to respond. Emma was still very young, but she was also intelligent and observant, and she had clearly been processing the story of how they came to be together. "Emma," he said gently, settling into the chair beside her bed, "sometimes people make choices that we don't understand, especially when they're scared or confused. Your birth parents probably didn't know how to take care of a baby with albinism, and they thought someone else could do a better job." Emma considered this seriously. "But you know how to take care of me." "I learned how," Marcus replied. "And I learned because I love you so much that I wanted to do everything right. Love makes us want to learn and do better." "Do you think they loved me?" Emma asked, her voice small and uncertain. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "I think they probably did love you, sweetie. But sometimes love isn't enough if people don't know what to do with their feelings. What matters now is that you're here with me, and I love you more than all the stars in the sky." Emma smiled at that, satisfied with his answer for now. Marcus knew there would be many more conversations about her origins as she grew older, and he was committed to being honest with her while also helping her understand that being abandoned didn't reflect her worth as a person. As he watched Emma drift off to sleep, Marcus reflected on how much they had both grown since that day he found her in the old chest.